Hello and welcome, potential friends and adventurers. Welcome to the DM table. In some previous episodes, I have talked about such things as how to plan a campaign together so that it may be grand, how to get grand design for your dungeons, how to talk to your players about the campaign, and how to have a wonderful campaign together. And whilst I really recommend the experience, sometimes you want to surprise your players, you want to suggest a world to them. Now, I talked before how I suggest getting the idea, but how about preparing that ever-precious campaign pitch that will garner the attention of your players towards your intended campaign and system potentially, getting them to like it from the get-go, to feel all warm and fuzzy thinking what they'll do when they get there, thinking how wonderful it will all be. And it all came from your repository of ideas. Today we are talking about how to prepare a campaign pitch. So, to get a good pitch after forming the idea, as I mentioned, I'll link it in the description, think of passions, preconceive them. After all, as I'll tell you about later, as for good character, so for a good world. Passion is the building block from which it all springs forth. You should think which passions are yours and which passions are of your players. You would need to think of multiple passions, potentially even per person, because we want freedom. We want freedom to really do what we want. And not just that, we want opportunity. We want great, wonderful opportunity to really express our wants as achievements. And as such, and this goes also for the DM, we want to preconceive which passions we could be expressing in the world. And as such, you may figure out which world do you want to suggest, and which activities, which stories, which objectives would you be suggesting. And as I said, we have those activities, those activity loops that I mentioned that players can enjoy knowing about even before they step up to do them. They are an obvious draw to the campaign. And as long as it's something that players really like the description of, which is what we're aiming for here, they'll already feel the desire to join in, even if the idea is new to them or they sort of subconsciously thought about it or have seen it somewhere, and now they want to join in. Either way, that's one of the first things that you would remember when thinking of a campaign pitch. Another is that you would want to keep the concept a bit open so that during session 0 or some sort of such meeting between you and the players in hopes of sussing out the details of the world, you have the openings to integrate some ideas and to form further. Now, if you really want to surprise them, this is going to be potentially a bit different, but you usually, even if you wanted to just give them a campaign pitch, you would still probably have a pre-session in which you would all talk about how to integrate with the world, and at that point you may take notes, literally or figuratively, of what your players would like, and then integrate that, whether directly and telling them or behind the scenes. Usually I prefer to arrange everything in the open, and then, well, don't worry, people won't spoil, they will only know about the world in general, as if they were people living in it, well, less even, and you won't spoil the story. You'll just figure out the activities, the goals, the campaign direction. Sometimes this will even stretch into a bit of the story, but this is rarer than frequenter to be as such specific. More often you'll have the situation where one of your players is a pilot that wants to work for a faction that will then have some sort of altercation, but also not a full war with another faction, and then something else will happen, but they have their goals about what they want to achieve in their life, and all this will mix into some really nice story that results in quite an epic campaign eventually. And of course, this is where you want your players' input. You want to hear which roles do they want to fulfill and which ones do they want to stumble onto. You want to also integrate sort of reverse of this, where sometimes grand opportunities just sort of ask players for their integration. And not as in a traditional campaign hook sort of sense, where we all need you, you should do it. No, just propose some grand opening to a player that they didn't expect but is potentially fully beneficial, or at least seemingly. It's as if suddenly getting an offer for a wonderful new job, which is a good example here, and this is an adventure hook, but it's not one of those you should be doing things, you might get a reward. It's more like you're a living person here and wow, luck has smiled upon you. You have stumbled onto something great. You could also not do it, but that's your choice. And mind you, don't expect players to always pick this up no matter how wonderful, because you want them to have selection and choice. You want them to be able to pick up opportunities out of some that they run into. And not all opportunities are just so wonderful and fairy tale like, though some are. Sometimes you do get invited to a ball, really, just for the sake of your enjoying of social and getting to know a prince you might like. But sometimes it's more mysterious. It's more like researching a paranormal phenomena in a dark alley or something like that. But it should be aimed at interest of players, even if suspected interest. As I said before, preconceived passions. Try to also open new ones, but tread carefully and with taste, and go step by step. But sometimes steps should be big, just as so it can be imposingly impactful to the story and the happenings. Also, charm with world building first. A story will come along and it will be central, but you should charm your players or readers or whoever they are with world building. When I say first, I don't mean it comes first in your presentation necessarily, especially if you're not a DM and you're a writer or something, but world building is something that lets the players want to enjoy your story. If you have bad world building but you have a good story, then people might like your characters in your story and they'll sympathize, but fatigue and pain will get to them eventually, and they will feel like it was a wasted opportunity where, yeah, they could have read your book further, or they read your book fully, but they won't reread it or recommend it much to their friends because it was kind of a painful trudge to get through it all, because there was too much of bad things or too little of interesting things, even if the centerpiece was wondrous. It just makes them expect less from your works, as opposed to if you have great world building, you might have even a medium story, but people will just enjoy thinking of scenarios, thinking of their place in the world if they were there, thinking of how they would want to interact. Kind of this is one of the main reasons why people watch even pretty bad comedic stuff with mild worlds, because there's not as much things that they need to worry about whilst watching them, even if the story and the characters are kind of closer to trash than not, whilst some serious stuff gets overlooked or watched less because it's so hard to ingest. The authors may have, or even sometimes may have not, done things that were too aggressive in the face of the player, reader, or viewer, and people have less desire to return to their work as such. But good balance is possible. After all, I'm not suggesting that all things be cushiony or even close to it. I'm just saying that when you're doing a serious thing, you should do a serious thing with at least some dose of realistic enthusiasm. As somebody said somewhere on the internet, apparently people like sci-fi less now because they have less hope for the future. I don't know whether this is true, and I certainly hope not. It's not the case with me. I have great hopes for the future. But if this is at all true, or it might even be true with even one of your players or viewers or whoever they may be, you might want to build towards reawakening at least some part of potential that they may feel from your world building, so as that the thing feels worth investing your attention, your soul into. So that's why I say charm with world building first, and then be sure to have the nice story and characters as well, really, even if they're the centerpiece. Of course, to charm with world building, you need to prepare good descriptions and be ready to answer questions at your session 0 or whenever you're giving your pitch. They should be really great at communicating all the previous uses, but they also really should be concise and functional. Try to tell them to yourself a couple of times first, think about them, fantasize, and you'll see whether it works. Also, as I said, keep it elegant and keep it understandable. Whilst if there is complex depth, certainly keep that too, but make sure that it's kept by working it into piece by piece. After all, we don't want to cut it away, but we don't want to also info dump people until we bury them with info. We want to have it flow from the big brick into smaller bricks, into the smallest bricks. So describe world concept, describe things that pull at things, the previous things, just in a simple enough manner, and then expand whenever asked about. Whenever you gain interest, you expand. Staple things, even if you're not in the privilege of talking to your players, viewers, whoever, directly, staple things into place, so that people can feel as if they're an observer traveling through the thing, observing it and absorbing. And there we go. Ask me whatever you like in the comments. I wish you luck in your world building and campaigns and adventure. If you thought this was unique, maybe for this small yet channel, you can spare a click. And I hope to see you next week. Bye.